Hello? I think so. Hello. Hi guys! Welcome to the launch of How to Be a Knowledge Ninja! Those of you who've joined us in real life, thank you so much. It's nice to be able to at least have the option of touching your faces. It's nice to have tangible people in the room. But welcome also to the people who are watching online. Hello! So yeah, welcome. This is Graham. He's one of my favourite authors of all time. And I'm very excited to be introducing his Knowledge Ninja book, which I'm sure will help lots of people through university over the years. We're going to have a quick keynote speech from Graham at first. Graham is the CEO of Think Productive, an amazing productive company, and he's going to be talking a little bit about that, how he started being a ninja, and what exactly Knowledge Ninja etiquette is about. So yeah, we're going to be doing that, and then afterwards I'm going to be coming in and asking Graham some Q&As. If you'd like to contribute to Q&As, you can obviously ask in person if you're here, and if you're online, you can also tweet with the hashtag Knowledge Ninja. The first 5 people to tweet a question for Graham during his talk are going to get a free book, and there's lots of other free stuff going up on the Twitter feed and Facebook feed, so you can have a look and see. We've got lots of different prizes for best photo, best question, funniest question, etc. So have a little look for that. But for now, I just want to welcome Graham Allcott.
Thank you. I'm going to move this up. So, good evening, everyone. Every morning, where I do most of my writing, which is a little glorified shed at the bottom of my garden, I stare at a fig tree. And when I look at this fig tree, every day it looks the same. But today it looked really different. So as I looked at the fig tree today, there was all these new little green shoots appearing on these otherwise bare branches, and I could start to see this moment, which was the start of spring and the sort of sense of renewal and hope and new things happening. And as I go around the world and do all this productivity stuff, a very common theme emerges, which is this whole idea of being present and in the moment and appreciating the joy of precious little moments. I think part of doing that work has just meant that I get better at doing that myself as the years have gone on. And I just took a moment this morning, which is very difficult, by the way. If you ever tried to be present and in the moment on a day when you're launching stuff or something really big going on, it's really hard. But I took this little moment and just noticed that these new leaves were arriving on this tree. And just the joy of that little moment. And what's really exciting is this evening, I kind of thought that's quite apt, because we're all sat here creating this new little moment this evening. There's so many people in this room who have been to Knowledge Ninja, the book, what the soil and the sun and the rain is to my fig tree in my garden. Which is, you've all contributed and played a role. So there's so many people here I need to thank just for getting this book into the world. Books often feel like they just arrive, you know, like there's just a launch, like we're just launching the book. But actually there's a whole heap of work that goes into writing and creating a book. And also it's not a one-man show. So there are a lot of people here that, as I go through and talk together, I just want to thank tonight. So welcome to the launch of Knowledge Ninja. I'm very excited to be here and share this with you. It's a book about the productivity of learning. So I'm just going to talk about 3 things. So I'm going to give you like the kind of inspiration behind why this book came about in the first place. I'm going to give you a bit about the process of writing it, and finally just findings and key bits and conclusions. So if you don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Think Productive. I'm online on Twitter at Graham Allcott, and I'm also the author of How to Be a Productivity Ninja, which is a book a bit like this, but about productivity and kind of starts with workplace productivity. And then this new book is all about the productivity of learning. So inspiration, why did I write this book? Why is the guy who does productivity writing a book for students of all ages? So students who are full-time, students who are maybe part-time and doing a French course on a Tuesday evening, juggling that with their job, part-time students who are doing distance learning, and also just like students of the world. So I think there's something really important about having a learning mindset to life in general. So why is the productivity guy doing this book about being aimed at students? So I think 2 reasons why I wrote this book. The first reason is the amount of people in workshops, as we talk to people about productivity, they start to ask me this question, which is, how can my kids learn this? Right. So we talk to people in workshops, and what happens is the productivity thinking sort of merges into happiness thinking and fulfillment thinking, and starting to think about getting clear on plans and stuff. We get all these emails of people who we got their email inbox to zero, but then they cleaned out their garage, you know, and they started to make changes in their house and changes in their life. So quite often get this question, why is this stuff not taught in schools? And I get this question of like, how can my kids learn this stuff? So really that was the first reason for the inspiration behind writing the book, was how can we write a book that kids can get this stuff with, and we can really start to introduce people to some of the wonders of productivity at a much kind of younger age and with a different context. That's the first reason. Second reason is that when I was at school, I was rubbish. I was really terrible, particularly when it came to kind of organised study. There's a whole heap of kind of ironies within this. I start the book on page 5 by reading some of my school reports. I'm going to share those with you. This is my French teacher, Mrs. Bettany. Graham is still satisfied with inaccurate work in his writing. He continues to rush his homework. This is now Mr. Cartwright, my history teacher. It's the same old story. Graham can work well in class, but not out of school. My form tutor, Mr. Goose, was particularly scathing. Incapable of simply arriving on time in the morning. I am not surprised by his present problems with coursework. And then this is one of the most beautiful human beings in the world, Dr. Rex Pogson, who a couple of people in this room will know, was my head teacher. The progress he has made has been pulled out of him, and most credit goes to others and not to himself. He sees it as a little local difficulty, but it's an attitude to a major future problem. That's my head teacher. So I needed this book. I was really terrible when it came to organised study at school. And I looked around and I was kind of thinking, you know, what books are out there that can help people do this? And it was exactly the same as when I looked for other books about productivity. They all seemed to come from a very similar mindset, which was the person writing this book is a guru. They know all the answers, and if only you could just be a bit more like them and be a bit more perfect, then everything would be fine. And what I realised when I was reading these books is I quite liked some of the advice, but I really hated this whole idea of let's all try and be perfect, and this idea that people had this stuff, you know, just really well grasped and were really perfect in the way they were doing things. My own sort of philosophy with productivity is that no one's perfect at it. No one gets it right all the time, and that ultimately we're all human. You know, so the whole productivity ninja concept is underpinned by one of the characteristics, which is that we're human, not superhero. We have amazing tools. We can often look like we're doing magic. We can often look like we have special powers, but actually we're all human underneath. So that's really why I wanted to write this book. It's about the process of the book. And I'm going to use one of the little concepts in the book. So I came up with this little acronym in the writing chapter of the book, which is to write like a twerp. What that means is any process of any book or essay or anything like that takes on 5 stages. There's the thinking, there's writing, editing, rewriting, and polishing. Put those things together, it spells twerp. Neat, huh? So let me tell you about the process of the book using that little acronym for me. So the thinking and researching, I have 2 people I have to thank at this point. So Alex and Holly, who are here this evening. Round of applause for Alex and Holly, please. So Alex and Holly joined us over the summer from the University of Sussex and helped us a lot with really getting me into the mindset. I mean, thinking about this morning in quite a scary way. 15 years since I was anywhere near full-time education or a student in that kind of formal sense, which kind of feels scary to say. But like to get back into that mindset. So particularly Holly helped me with really thinking about balance and what does work-life balance mean for students. Often it means balance between a part-time job, between some kind of study, between some kind of social life, between some kind of community of people you live with, your housemates and so on. You're balancing all these different things. So to get into that mindset, we came up with a whole series of different things which you'll find in the book. There's a whole chapter in the book on balance. And also some things to help manage that sort of motivation and, you know, directing the right kind of attention towards your studying and the things that you want to do, and not just spending the whole time, you know, just having fun. So we came with this idea of fun points. So you earn fun points from an hour of self-directed study earns you half a fun point. And a fun point you can spend on any leisure activity of your choosing, but basically 1 fun point equals 1 hour of fun in some way or another. So 1 hour of watching Netflix is 1 fun point. Going for coffee with a friend is probably 1.5 fun points. And you get the idea through to kind of whole weekends away, whole weeks away and stuff like that. We wrote a little piece on how to stay motivated, how to kick yourself out of bed when you don't have a deadline. So really getting into the mindset of like, how do we help people to manage that sense of balance, which for me is like, it's very different from a book that's about study skills. This book for me, I wanted this book to be a book that's a life manual for people who happen to be studying, rather than a study manual just for the studying bits. It kind of felt important to me to treat people as humans rather than as automaton studying people, if that makes sense. And then Alex helps me a lot with decision making, and in particular a load of really great psychology research. So there's some really great stuff in the book. One example of which is on the psychology of planning. They asked people, there's a study at British Columbia University, they asked people to estimate how long it would take them to write their thesis, and then to provide 3 estimates. So to provide just a realistic estimate, how long is it going to take for me to write my thesis, a pessimistic estimate, like if I'm really thinking it's going to take a long time, and then an optimistic thesis. So what it found was that on average, people's estimates were 7.4 days longer than their pessimistic estimate of how long it was going to take. 21.6 days longer than the realistic view of how long it's going to take. And 28.1 days longer than the optimistic estimate. So it just kind of proves that we learn the planning fallacy very early in life, and if the people in this room, if you're anything like me, you remain quite bad at it throughout the rest of your life as well. So it's still something that I've not mastered, but like I think just the idea of realizing how just unrealistic we are in the way that we plan, and the way that the brain just sort of plays tricks with us. We don't take into account the kind of blockages and the things that get in the way when we plan things. Also found that drinking lemonade is really good for the brain, so that's good news for everyone in this room. Drinking lemonade that has sugar produces glucose, and what that means is those neurotransmitters fuel brain activity. So if you drink lemonade, actually it aids your self-control. So it allows the brain to react to things better, to make better decisions, to procrastinate less. So if you want to procrastinate less, one of the many, many things this book will tell you is drink some lemonade. But only lemonade with sugar in, so if you drink diet lemonade, it doesn't work. And there's some studies that back all that up. So we did loads of thinking, and we also did some really great focus groups, and really started to get into the mindset of students and studying, and how do we apply this stuff in this book, Knowledge Ninja, which at this point was just a bunch of ideas scribbled down on just bits of paper and post-it notes and stuff. And then the idea was over the summer I would do all the writing, and then there was lots going on. I kind of got drawn into all these other things, and then it was autumn, still hadn't really done any writing, and the project was starting to slip a little bit, and I was starting to procrastinate because I hadn't done any writing. I was particularly procrastinating about the chapter 9 of the book, which is called Procrastination. That was a particular problem. And then I remember what I did for Productivity Ninja. So I was in this same situation of like every week I would have this thing on my to-do list, write book, and every week I was not, I was coming back and reviewing this and realizing I wasn't making any progress. I realized that I needed to make some space, and that's what I did with Productivity Ninja. Is I booked some flights to Sri Lanka, found this little beach hut that had no Wi-Fi whatsoever, and was just really cut off. And I wrote Productivity Ninja, the first draft, because there's, believe me, a much bigger process than just the first draft. But I wrote the first draft in about 3.5 weeks. Productivity Ninja, and so I was like, okay, I need to regain my ninja mojo here. So I booked some tickets to Sri Lanka and arrived at exactly the same beach hut. 3 years since I was last there, and arrived there, found that they'd just installed Wi-Fi right in the hut. I was like, this is a problem. My whole point for being here is that you don't have Wi-Fi, and now you do. So I decided that my biggest distraction was probably going to be Facebook. So I just absolutely ditched my Facebook account. So I closed the whole thing down, and I've remained sort of a little bit sort of on Twitter, but not really on Twitter. But really just cut down my ability to be distracted, and just making that one very sort of big and decisive, bold decision saved me lots and lots of temptations over the next few weeks. The word count started to go up, and I kind of started to recover that ninja mojo and started to get the book going. Then I came back home, and I have some more people to thank here. So the editing and rewriting parts, in particular to thank a whole bunch of people, some of whom are in this room, who were part of my focus group. So the big thing for me is to get the first draft down and then to share it on conference calls with a whole bunch of people who just volunteered to read it. And I put their names on in the back of the book to say thank you to those people. And honestly, the insights and the challenges and the kind of sort of help that they give me, and there's just no substitute for putting something out there when it really is in no fit state to be consumed, and just allowing people to give you feedback. And that's like takes a lot of bravery. It's the part of the process for me where I'm really battling with all my kind of inner thought process. Like, everyone's going to hate this, it's going to be rubbish, and your mind is just going crazy for all those kind of thoughts. But to just be vulnerable and put that stuff out there, and to accept the often quite harsh criticism that comes back, is actually a very important part of the process for me. And particularly for this book, it just felt really kind of transformative. So thank you to all the people who were part of those focus groups. Also to my editor at Icon, Kate Hewson, who I know is not here this evening but is watching online, I think, Kate. So thank you again for just making me a better writer, so challenging me when there were things that I weren't expressing properly and really helping me to get to grips with what the book needed to be. And then in the polishing phase, we started to get the draft back, and it was starting to look a bit like a book, and there were kind of nice little pictures and stuff. And then we realised that there just weren't enough pictures, and we were kind of struggling with that, and we had a couple of people who were supposed to be doing pictures for us, and it wasn't really happening. So I just really want to thank Emma, who's here tonight, for just pulling some amazing graphics and stuff out of the bag very last minute. We basically had about 3 days of just like WhatsApp liaison, with just kind of little JPEGs and things back and forth on WhatsApp, and just really, I just think your graphics have really made a difference to the book, so I just want to say thank you for that. So round of applause to Emma, because she's in the room. And then the final thing, just to talk about, is just some of the findings and key bits and things that you can look forward to in this book. Lena will be talking to you more about where you can get it and all that sort of stuff. So what's in this book? So the first few chapters are really about the personal mindset and personal approach that you need to gain around not just studying, but actually just how to live your life in a kind of productive way. So the first chapter is all about the mindset of the knowledge ninja, characteristics like balance and focus, and experiencing Zen-like Calm, stealth and camouflage, all that good kind of ninja stuff that if you've read Productivity Ninja you'll know all about. Second chapter is about getting organized, and I think what's exciting for me about this chapter is my challenge was to shrink the whole of the Productivity Ninja book into one chapter of this book and just go, right, here's what you need to know in terms of getting organized. And I felt like it really, I always love with productivity just the idea of constraints. Like if you've got something really narrow that you've got to kind of force yourself into, it really focuses the mind in terms of what's important, what am I trying to say, all that stuff. So the second chapter that's on getting organized, I think, is me kind of nailing the productivity stuff in a way that is way more concise and better than what's in Productivity Ninja, actually. Chapter 3 is all about balance, so all the work-life balance stuff I was just talking about. And then I get into the real practical nitty-gritty, so there's a chapter on how you learn, so the theory of learning as a process, some of the theory around people's different learning styles and how the way you receive information for different people is really important. Then there's some real nitty-gritty skill stuff, so there's a chapter on general study, the art of day-to-day magic, as I call it, so just making every day count, how to deal with group work, lectures, reading, all that sort of stuff. Chapter on writing, and in particular look out for how thinking about sex helps you write essays, that's in there. And then a chapter on memory techniques, which includes how the Spice Girls can help you pass your exams. And then a chapter about exams and particularly nerves, how do you deal with some of those inner demons, what I refer to in Productivity Ninja and in this book as the lizard brain. How do you deal with some of those voices in the back of your head that really get you down and help you to lose focus. A whole chapter on procrastination. It was like the one thing whenever we talked to students as part of those focus groups was like, just give us loads of procrastination stuff, like that's really important. So there's a whole chapter on procrastination. And the final chapter is about curiosity and childishness. Like, I think something really important to me is the idea of experimentation, the idea of being playful, and in whatever you're doing, finding the joy within that stuff. So I think it's often very easy to get formulaic with this stuff, and particularly around education right now. Like, it feels to me like people are paying a lot of money to go to university, therefore they sort of want to get their money back, and they treat it like a CV building kind of process, and that's kind of what they then equate to learning. which I think is really sad. Important that we stay curious as we go through our lives, whether you're studying full-time or not, like just, having that sense of childishness and curiosity and kind of asking better questions rather than looking for the answers. So that's the stuff that's in the book. I found one thing which I thought I'd share, which is actually just the key to learning, right? So here's the key. If you really want to know like the key to learning and making learning stick, the key is self-testing. It's been found to be much more powerful as a learning tool than class participation, than reading through your notes, than looking at stuff with highlighter pens, which it actually comes out as next to useless. And basically what it comes down to is we learn by doing. So if you're able to instill a sense of jeopardy in what you're doing, so the fact that you're testing yourself and the fact that you might need to know the answers then allows you to reflect back on those tests. And I think this is, for me, like a real kind of metaphor for life, and back to that whole human thing I keep going on about, which is focusing on your mistakes instead of trying to ignore them is actually the key to success. If you can start to learn from the mistakes that you make, for me that's a really important thing. A couple of other things which were very overriding themes through the book. So the power of little and often. So cramming is a really inefficient way of dealing with exam revision. Doing everything in one go is a really inefficient way of doing anything, whether it's writing or something else. So just short bursts, little and often, and particularly around trying to remember stuff and trying to learn stuff. The brain is processing all this stuff and making sense of things as we sleep. So giving it that little feed, every day, every few hours, just that little and often kind of approach, much better than cramming. The power of sleep and rest for the same reason, but actually really counterintuitive to students. Like the whole idea of burning the midnight oil and sort of doing really long marathon exam sessions or revision sessions or whatever. It's kind of like there's a kind of macho-ness to that, but it's actually hugely inefficient. And the power of just enough. So in making decisions, in making choices, we're often taught from an early age of school. So when learning is something that other people are directing, it's all about getting 10 out of 10 on the test, or finishing the book, and doing everything and getting everything completed. And actually with self-directed study, it's like the opposite. The idea is to get just enough. So get just enough of the reading list covered, but don't try and read everything on the reading list. To get just enough of the way through that book to get to the bit you want, but don't try and read the whole book as research. So just the power of just enough as a psychological kind of approach, rather than trying to do everything. So those are just a few just bits and pieces in terms of what I learned from writing the book. As I was saying before, like it was a book that I really felt like I needed when I was at school, and I really hope people are going to find some value in this in terms of how that changes their own lives. A couple of final thank yous. I just have to thank Pippa and Richards, who from the Think Productive team have just put a lot of work into creating this precious little moment that we're sharing this evening. So I just wanted to thank them. So just a round of applause for Richard. And also to the whole team at Think Productive, in particular Rachel and Paula, Shaz, Holly and the Ninja crew for helping me to make the space to write the book. So whilst I'm off writing the book, the day-to-day work of Think Productive, all of our workshops with all the different companies that we're working with around the world continues, and I'm not around for that part of it. So that takes a lot of patience and support from all those people to make that happen. My final little reflection is one of my favourite quotes of all time. I love a quote. Like Twitter is, it's a brilliant thing for like quotes and stuff. But one of my favourite quotes of all time is from Walt Disney, who says, "We don't make films to make money. We make money to be able to make more films." And I'm really hoping, of course, that we sell a shed load of Knowledge Ninja this evening, and it makes some money, not least to sort of pay me back for all the flights to Sri Lanka and time off from work and all that sort of stuff. But much more importantly for me, this is about like helping students to do what it says on the front, which is to study smarter, focus better, and achieve more. Not just for the sake of that itself, but for the sake of what that will mean to students is, I think, and I hope, that they'll develop one of the ninja characteristics that we talk about a lot, which is Zen-like Calm, which is really all about operating within the present moment. It's about not spending all of your time beating yourself up about what's coming next week, or spending all your time worrying about the thing you did wrong yesterday, but being present in the moment. That for me is where the magic happens. That for me is where the greatest periods of productivity come from. We often think that our greatest periods of productivity come from deadlines, which is kind of true, but a deadline just focuses you to be present in the moment because it's the only thing you can do. So I'm hoping that this book will instill in students, in an age of information overload and just a culture of checking and flitting and being very unpresent and unfocused and in the moment, that this book will help people to kind of really get that focus, to be really present in the moment, to recognize precious little joyous moments like this, precious little joyous moments like my leaves on my fig tree, and many, many more. So thank you.
Thank you, Graham, that was amazing. I'm going to come and bother you with some questions now, is that alright? Should we sit down?
Yes, sit down.
I'll lower it. Looks like the first 5 books have definitely gone through lots of questions. People are jumping on free things, as is human nature.
As is all good, yeah.
That's all good. How's that? So yes, we have lots of questions from Twitter. I hope you're excited.
I'm very excited. Hello to the internet, by the way.
Hello! I assume from all these kind of different kind of participant questions, you've been asked a lot of ninja questions, so hopefully we'll come up with some new ones this time.
Cool.
Really catch you off guard. So we've got a question from Oliver McLean. He says, what inspired you to write these books?
What inspired me to write these books? Well, I think the inspiration was slightly different for each one. With the first one, it was kind of my own journey into productivity, realizing that I was particularly bad at it, doing lots of reading, getting quite good at it, and then falling into teaching it. So I think the thing that you struggle with the most is often the thing that once you master, you should teach other people, because you can kind of really recognize their pain. And I think that's when I talk about the being human stuff, a lot of this, the sort of perfection myth books come from this point of view, well, you just do this and this and this, and it doesn't really address the fact that, people are blocked, or they're procrastinating, or they're kind of worried about stuff, or they're not getting it, or whatever. Yeah. So that was really productivity ninja. And then with this one, it was just what I said before, really, just the whole being asked loads and loads, people, oh, you should write a book about this, write a book about that. And one of the themes which was just coming up time and time again was, how can I give this to my son? How can I give this to my daughter? Like, what's the way of being able to get this at an earlier age? And Think Productive, we train primarily, I would say, people in their kind of mid-20s up to mid-50s, I would say, kind of mid-level managers, senior managers of big organizations handling massive budgets, who don't know how to do a to-do list really well, and because no one's ever taught them in that either, I think can really help people. So I'm hoping to do that at an earlier age. I'd love to have this sort of stuff taught in school. My ultimate aim, I think.
So do you think on some levels it's a kind of unlearning and then relearning process?
Yeah, it can be. I think there's always a stage of when you start to relearn something, and you get into there's an educational model which talks about this idea of conscious incompetence. So kind of realizing the things that you get wrong. And then it takes a lot of effort to realise the things that you're starting to do well before it becomes a habit. Yeah. So I think that's often a challenge with any of this sort of stuff, is that it actually asks people to break out of things that they're not even thinking about. No one really thinks about how the process, how you write to do this, how you revise. You just do. Yeah. And it takes some time and effort to think about that before you start to create the habits on the other end.
Definitely. Sorry, I know. I have a question though. While that's happening. You'll meet a lot of people who are very, in some ways, unproductive, like you originally were, and you just read out some of your school reports. Would you like to have a hand in curriculums and stuff like that? Do you think it would help to start earlier? Because one of my other questions is from a guy called Colin Snedden, who says, would the book be suitable for my 11-year-old daughter? Now, at 11, do you think people have already learned not the wrong habit?
Yeah.
Do you think, is this book helpful for 11-year-olds?
Well, yes, I think so. I think the aim in terms of the target audience when we wrote it was, we were kind of thinking, A-level, 18-year-olds, stretch down to a bit younger than that, and stretch certainly upwards from that. But then I write a bit like a child anyway, so I imagine there's not that many long words in it. There's a couple of rude bits. Yeah. There's the sexy model writing.
Which isn't actually about sex. I was very disappointed to see when I got the manuscript. I was like, oh. Yeah.
And if your 11-year-old is very intelligent, which I'm sure they are, then I'm sure it'll be for them. But I think in terms of your curriculum thing, I don't think people see. No one's taught it, right? So it feels to me like it's a bit like when you arrive in an office and they go, "Oh, there's Outlook. You know how to do email." You know, and it's like you don't really get that much attention around the process of learning. You know, like the process of note making and certainly things like self-testing. You know, like my focus groups are finding that even now that's just not, even though it's psychologically, like it's just a fact. Like you just look at self-testing and the analysis of that, like it's so much more. It's so much more beneficial than spending loads of time like reading and rewriting your notes and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's just not that conscious in terms of those really sort of ear to the ground kind of study skills.
Another one of the questions, which actually might be relevant to a lovely lady in the room, what's the inspiration for the graphics? I love the use of stationery, says Maria Garner.
Cool. So the inspiration for the graphics, we wanted to do a couple of things. We wanted to give people things that they would recognise. They're all made out of like paper clips and bulldog clips and stuff that as students or as people in an office, like you would kind of recognise that stuff. The other thing was, and this was particularly true for my company, Think Productive, when we're out there doing workshops, it's like everyone else uses the stock photography, and you will have seen these on websites where it's like people in an office or people gazing out to the ocean, and they're in an office and they're looking like this and they've got their shiny teeth, and they use this stock photography stuff. And we wanted to do something that was like, okay, we're different from that stuff. Like we're human, we're real, we're playful, we passionately believe in this stuff. This is not just like we're going through the motions doing a training course. This is different. Yeah. So that was really why we went down that sort of route, and then it just felt like a really obvious thing with this book to build on that from the original book and kind of do some new stuff as well. So we had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you ever make them in the office? Do you ever sit there? Because I have.
I don't, but I imagine when I'm out for the day and people are procrastinating, they probably do play around with different things, but that's fine.
Another question. What drove you to become an expert in productivity?
Well,
driven to it.
Driven to it, yeah. Well, I honestly fell into it. Like, so for me, it was I was doing a chief exec job, left that job to go freelance for a while. Really, if I'm honest, to have a bit of a break from it and and sort of change my lifestyle around, and realised that I'd gone from this chief exec job where I had this team of people around me to just being on my own, and realizing that what I'd done for the good few years prior to that was really sit at my desk, have really great ideas, and then rely on a really great team of people to actually do the stuff and do the work. Some people call that leadership and get away with it for much longer, but like for me it was like, oh, I'm actually not really good at following this stuff through, right? So it was then learning that stuff, getting really passionate and interested in productivity, and then off the back of that, just talking to people about it, and they were like, show me. And so really the whole thing came from there. So if I'm really honest, like I kind of fell into it. So there's a thing on my GrahamAllcott.com website, there's I have an alternative biography where it basically says that, and it kind of says like I've never really had a career plan, and like all these things. You can very easily spin the narrative to be like this kind of perfect thing, but you can also go, it wasn't really like that. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to look at the alternative,
I appreciate as well as the kind of like you're not naturally this way, and I think it's perceived to be people who are naturally born to be organised will win, whereas you're kind of saying like this is not my natural inclination. Yeah. Like you've kind of decided.
Yeah, and I'd say half of our team are naturally the same as me, which is kind of flaky, strategic, big picture thinking, not bogged down by the detail kind of thinkers. But like all of us in our different ways and using a lot of the same tools have found ways to be able to get good at the detail stuff and get good on being clear about what we're doing and on delivering stuff. So I still would say I'm not naturally organised, like in terms of my instincts and where I would want to direct my work and my day and whatever. And that's why I need like good checklists and good to-do lists and stuff that help me to make that easy and not feel like a chore.
Did you look to hire messy people? No,
I mean,
be naturally messy.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the point is it doesn't really matter. Yeah. I think anyone can get this stuff, and certainly if I can get it, then so can anyone else.
Yeah. Melissa Green asks, if you had to pick one thing from your book for a student to learn, what would it be? Which is unfair because you wrote a whole book. Yeah. I'm sure you just tweeted about it.
Yeah, so saying at the end, the whole like little and often thing, and in particular within that, I think just the whole thing of not looking at all the things that are portrayed as being macho, cramming, doing the whole essay in one go, getting it in just before the deadline, all those things which like they feel in some ways like a really sort of efficient way of working as well, right? Because it's like right to the last minute and you've probably swung around the rest of the time. But usually what happens, my response to that would be, what happens before that, let's do it at the last minute. Usually you've spent a week beating yourself up about the fact that you're not doing the work, and usually it tips over when it's like your fear of missing the deadline and letting somebody down and not getting it on time replaces your fear of this isn't going to be good enough, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't get focused. Do you know what I mean? So like you spend the whole week sort of in what I put in the book, distant deadline deficiency. So it's like you're not really making any progress, but because you've got this deadline looming, even though you're not making any progress, you chain yourself to your own desk, rather than actually what would be more productive is at that point productive procrastination, which is like just having a day of relaxation and coming back fresh tomorrow, starting again. So that whole thing about the kind of little and often thing is probably the best mindset.
What else we got? Frank asks, what advice would you give to students juggling loads of projects and their degree? Do you think that's a good idea? In the first place?
Yeah, like I do, and part of the reason, the story behind a lot of those bad school reports of mine was I was also at the same time like singing in a band, doing 2 paper rounds that took up 6 and a bit days a week. Like I was on the school committee, like I was doing all this other stuff, and so I've always been someone who chaotically does lots of things and bites off more than I can chew, and is all, I'd always be the person who's late for stuff and all that sort of thing. But in terms of like juggling loads of projects and stuff, so one thing I would definitely say is don't just have a to-do list, have a project list as well. So here are the tasks that I need to do, but have a separate list which is like, these are the sort of end goals that I'm working towards. And then the reason that you have that list is so that once a week you're coming back and reviewing it regularly. So just that sense of, right, where am I at in my life? Let me have a coffee and just go through this list and work out for each of these projects what's next. What am I working on over the next week? Broadly speaking, that's like, that is probably that chapter in this new book about being organised summarised into just a few sentences. Really, like, I think if you can get control of that and start to be a project manager, not just for what you're doing in your studies, but for your whole life, I think the value of that is just huge.
And before I let Twitter take over, is there anybody in the room who'd like to ask any questions? Anything burning for Graham?
I was just going to ask, working in sexual health, you mentioned the thinking about sex and the knowledge. Is there anything I can use in my life about promoting good sexual health?
Sexual knowledge. Go.
So, wow, that's the question. So the question is, just to repeat for the internet, so working in sexual health, is there anything from the book and the sexy model for writing that you can use in your work? So how to promote good sexual health? Well, there is the balance chapter does talk about just the whole notion of how relationships, dating, all that sort of stuff is a part of, certainly a part of most students' lives, and I think treating that maybe in some kind of way around balance is kind of an important thing. The sexy thing is just an acronym really, so it's just
planning.
So it's about helping people to structure writing and to structure paragraphs and to really kind of just provide some guidance around that sort of thing. But I just think it's totally an important thing, and part of this whole thing of it's the kind of stuff that schools and universities and everything else just don't really, no one talks about that stuff, right? And if they do, they talk about it really badly, and no one's really kind of talking about it in that sense of this is a real challenge that you're facing and the impact of those things. Good question, right there.
I'll go back to Twitter for a second. What productivity technique do you use the most? The procrastination one?
Well, probably so many. What do I use? A lot of people who've read Productivity Ninja don't do, which I think is really important, is a lot of people talk about the importance of review weekly and having a good checklist around that. For me, having a daily checklist. So I'm asking myself questions like, what's my energy like today? Who's in the office today, and what do I need them for? I ask myself, what are the 2 big rocks that I need to work on today? And a big rock is basically the biggest priority is that if I structure the day around that and let everything else fall around it, it's going to really help me to get those big things off my plate kind of thing. Sometimes with big rocks you've got broken down and stuff. So just having that first thing in the morning, I think the consequence of not doing that is, for most people, they roll out of bed. So here's the question, like, when do you first check emails in the morning? And most people go, oh, when I boot my computer up at the start of the day in the office. But for most people, it's rolling over in bed and going, right, and we start scrolling and we start, giving ourselves and surrounding our brain with everybody else's priorities, before we've thought about our own. And so I think a big thing for me is like having that little bit of time, particularly early in the morning, to just think through and structure the day. And you were asking me just before we started about meditation. So meditation is one of those things that I think a lot of people have an intention to do it, and then a lot of people don't do it. And so we have a thing where we do it collectively in the office. And what I love about that is it just creates some accountability around it and a community around it, and everyone does it at the same time. So we just use the Headspace app and just do the Take 10 thing. So it's just a little 10-minute thing. And I think that is, honestly, one of the most powerful productivity tools if used consistently well.
So you do that every day?
Yeah, we do that in the office. We do that every day. The days that I'm not in the office, I have to confess, the days where I do it less. So there'll be some days when I'm not in the office where I'll do it on my own, and some days where I just forget, or it doesn't happen, or I have a cup of tea instead, or whatever. So that's kind of, that's what I'm trying to improve on.
Makes sense. Jim Heatherton says,
hi Jim.
Hi Jim. How do we get this thinking into the mainstream of education? Which I guess links to my question about kind of work schemes and curriculums and stuff. But
so how do we get this into the mainstream of education?
The book?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I think that's probably a start, right? Like I think I'm sure there's an element. I'm going to give you a really optimistic view of this, which is, I'm sure that an element of how students learn would come from student demand. So if people are starting to, people are seeing this book in schools, and if the people who write curriculum are starting to notice that phenomenon that is happening, they might think, oh, how can we actually put this as part of the curriculum? I'd love it to be something that was taught in every school, and not even just the stuff that's in this book, but I think there's probably loads of other stuff, just around how do you lead a good life, and like no one talks about how to manage money in school. There's careers. I think there's so many of these things that are either not taught or taught really unrealistically and badly. Not just the productivity stuff, but like I don't know. I mean, if anyone out there on the internet has the answer to how we do that, like I'd love to know. Please drop me a line. But I do think maybe the starting point, and my goal is to get it into as many students' hands as possible, and kind of start the conversation from there.
Because I think it's quite interesting, like how we learn to understand time as well. Because I went to like a Steiner preschool, so just before school I went to just a Steiner's preschool, nothing else. And my brother didn't, and my mum noticed that I'm the person who asks, what's happening next? What's happening tomorrow? How many days till this is happening? As I got younger.
Interesting.
So one of it is something about kind of putting it in people's cognitive minds. Because in the day they plan and be like, right, at 2 o'clock we're doing this. Really outrageous. Are you going to do that with your child? Do you think? Are you going to put productivity into his?
I would like to say no. I will let him be like free as a bird and everything. And
no to-do list.
You can probably ask my wife how realistic that is and whether you think that's going to happen. So.
What else have we got? Okay, Maria asks, what advice would you give to a part-time student balancing study and a day job?
Study and a day job. So, I mean, I can come back to how I had to deal with the writing process of the book. And this is something I think is quite central to productivity generally, which is just the whole idea of making space for what matters. So I think my booking the flight tickets to Sri Lanka is kind of saying, okay, I can't control this today, but at least I can make the decision to make space tomorrow or the next day or whatever. So I think part of the problem with juggling isn't the actually setting the time, but it's like feeling really bad when that doesn't happen. Where does procrastination come from, and where does fear come from? It often comes from, have we made the right choices or the wrong choices at different times? So I would say, like, if you can just spend a bit of time doing what I was talking about earlier, so mapping out your projects, and by projects I don't just mean what are your assignments, but like what are you trying to achieve with your learning, like what are you trying to get to the end, and your projects at work, which are not just the projects on the company project plan, but you might have a project to finish my appraisal. That's a project, right? It's more than one comprehensive list, and then being able to come back and flip between those two modes of learning and life, learning and work, will really help. But just, I think, I think work-life balance, and I'm going to definitely come onto this in future books, like I really want to think more about work-life balance, I think is often something that people strive for, and we try and get like the perfect mix of everything, and I think perfect is just the wrong aim. Like there'll always be something that's a bit out of balance, I think. So when it comes to like part-time study and stuff, just not feeling bad about that, and just, if work's taking over for a while and then study takes over for a while, another point, just feel good about that all the time.
Yeah, the myth of consistency, I suppose, is probably good.
So.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the room? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Graham? Got one over here.
You said near the start of this that help you write the book, you took 5 times away from any distraction. What would you say personally is the best way to stop yourself from procrastinating?
What would I say personally is the best way to stop myself procrastinating? So in the book I talk about the battle that goes on in your head between the two different versions of you. So you have the clever, motivated you, and most of us like to think that we are that person all the time. And then we have the lazy, scatterbrained version of you. Most of us don't like to feel that we're like that, but we kind of secretly know that we are sometimes. And it's like a boxing match, it's like the graphic in the book is like the two of them boxing together. And the way I always think about it in my head is like the lazy scatterbrain version of you doesn't have the kind of killer sucker punch, but jabs away at you all the time. But the clever, motivated version of you has the ability to knock out the other one with one punch. So for me, it's about how do you win that battle. Like, so taking on the characteristics of the clever, motivated part of me involves me doing things like installing a Facebook blocking app on Google Chrome so that Facebook doesn't come up on Google Chrome. Having made decisions about not having email on my phone, not having notifications popping up on my phone all the time. Like all of those things, I just do that once and make one really big commitment to doing that one thing, and then it saves hundreds of possibilities of being distracted further down the line. So I kind of think about this ongoing internal battle that we're having with those two different versions of yourself. And there's loads of different ways you can win that out, right? So, cancelling your Netflix account for a month in the month that you need to revise. Or creating momentum by creating a deadline in somebody else's world. So, if I've got a big project on, if I put a meeting in with somebody else that says, I'm going to run through where I'm up to with this project at this, moment in time in 1 week and a day, then it suddenly creates more momentum than just me sat there stewing with it and saying, oh, well, I can do something tomorrow or whatever. So just all those little things that your clever, motivated you can do to almost like trick and fool your lazy, scatterbrain version of you. I think for me that's a big part of how you avoid procrastination. And I think the other part of it is like, just that sort of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and kind of intelligence and knowing of your lizard brain. So sort of listening to those voices that generally bring you fear and worry, and working out where that's coming from, basically.
I have another question from Twitter that's a very interesting one. Will Think Productive be running workshops in universities and schools based on the book?
Yeah, we'd love to. I think the honest answer to that is I've spent so long writing the book that we haven't written the workshop yet. So that's the really kind of upfront and honest thing to say. But like, I also think, we have done before is the other thing to say. So we've done a lot of stuff in schools and universities. We've done some stuff with students. We've done stuff with the staff. We've done stuff in student unions. Actually, just doing our regular productivity ninja stuff. Yes, I think we will have a Knowledge Ninja workshop that will introduce particularly productivity around study. When that will be, I would probably say, like, realistically, like, we won't get it perfect until like the autumn or even kind of Christmas time, before we're kind of at a stage where we're ready to go out to the rest of the world with it. But like in the meantime, our productivity ninja stuff works really well in those settings as well. So.
Brilliant. Okay, this is kind of similar to another question, but let me see if you can do it. What would be your absolute hashtag Knowledge Ninja tip?
My absolute
really hard.
hashtag knowledge ninja tip. Yeah, I think that is a really hard question. And I think I sort of answered it before with the little and often thing. I think I'd probably say that.
Yeah.
And just, again, that other little stat about self-testing. So just, coming back and testing yourself on stuff regularly. This is the crazy thing for me, is like the amount of times in my school and university life where we practiced like sample papers or past papers like once, like in a mock exam or 3 weeks before, and actually self-testing yourself regularly, like doing a mock exam paper from week 1 of the course, and noticing how many mistakes you make, noticing how much stuff is wrong, actually is the fastest way to learn anything. So I think doing a lot more of that, and just a lot more of that sort of awareness that a lot of the traditional stuff, reading your notes, writing them out again, highlighter pens, like it just doesn't work so well. So just being aware of that.
Makes sense. I think we're going to have one last question. What do you think? Do we want to have it from the room? I have one if you don't. But you can go for it. Zen, we have a question. I'm going to be selfish and take mine then.
Go for
it. So you've written one about Productivity Ninja, which is about business. And then going backwards, you've written one about study and being a study ninja and a knowledge ninja. Those two things are supposed to link theoretically, because we want to be kind of employed after we leave university. What kind of skills do you think you can learn at university that you can use around the office, like directly? Like what would you use in your bedroom studying or in the library that you can see transferring well into an office environment?
Yeah, so...
and how can you boast about that in interviews?
Well, I think the first thing to say about all of that is that one of the main reasons I wrote the book was because we just knew that there was so much crossover. Like we were being asked constantly, like, can we just apply this productivity stuff to studying? And like just through the whole process of writing the book, people write for for their work. They write reports, they write emails. You're writing all the time. People are praising stuff. People are summarizing stuff, all that kind of stuff. You're having to deal with, in an office situation, like way more information now than we've ever had to deal with at any point in history. Just bombarded, just coming in on email, social media, and everything else. So I just think there's a lot of skills in terms of how to hone in on the best bits of information that I think are as applicable to student life as they are to anything else. The other thing I would say is that it's a bit of a cliche, but like to focus in as an employer on the people who've got a 2-1 and not the people who've got a first in their degree. So just the whole thing of like noticing what somebody else, like I'm always really interested in not just how you dealt with playing the academic game. Maybe I have this view because I wasn't particularly good at playing the academic game myself, but like noticing more importantly than that, what's the other 10 things that you're juggling alongside that and you still got that grade. So I think I'm always very impressed by people who, started a magazine at university, or were running a society, or were playing in bands, or just whatever the other thing is. But just to have that level of being self-motivated, self-organized, having an attitude of kind of let's put something out into the world that's interesting. I think is that for me is actually as important a focus in any kind of learning, whether it's school or university or anything else, than what mark do you get at the end of it for giving the right answers, particularly in a world where all the answers are on Google. It's all there, right? So for me it's about the more interesting side of that, which is asking better questions and putting good stuff out into the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Graham. For those of you watching online, thank you so much for tweeting in. Thank you everybody for coming in and asking questions. It's been brilliant. Graham's books are available in all good bookstores or online. They're also available in ebook. So yeah, thank you so much, Graham.
Cool, thank you.
You've definitely helped my workflow in my life, which is definitely amazing. So thank you, and I want to give a round of applause to everyone in the room and to Graham for launching the book and being an amazing ninja. The books are available at the back, and I'm sure there's lots of copy available. And if you want to come and get Graham to sign any, I'm sure he'd be very welcome.